everyone. Welcome back to In the Know. This series digs into the details on a variety of topics around the 2025 World Conference. My name is Jenn Killpack, and I serve the church as Director of Communications. My co-host, Susan Naylor, is going to be along, I think, a little bit later. She is in the World Church Leadership Council meetings today, and they were running a little bit long, and she serves as the World Church Secretary and Office Director for the First Presidency's office, and we are both members of the World Conference Directors team. So today, we're really excited to have John Wight and Larry Martin with us. They are going to be talking about the legislative process with us. So welcome, John and Larry.
Thank you. Greetings, all.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So Susan informed me this morning that there are 94 days until World Conference. And I was like, why do you keep telling me this, Susan? But she is very good at the countdown. And I also think that it's important for all of us to know that the early bird registration ends on April 1st. So if you are wanting to get into the generosity-based registration fees, or if you're interested in the conference bundle, like the conference materials, bonus materials like the bag and the t-shirt at a discount, that is only available till April 1st. And also the meal tickets. So if you wanted to pre-order some meal tickets, those are only available through early bird registration too. So want to just make sure we highlight that. And let's see. I think those were the only housekeeping things. So let's go ahead and dig into today's topic. John, we understand that you are the Parliamentarian of the World Conference. So what does that mean?
Well, I have been a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians since 1982. I was certified as a registered parliamentarian and eventually as a professional registered parliamentarian. My job at World Conference is to assist the First Presidency in making the best decisions regarding parliamentary procedure. And I say the best that I can because when I began as a parliamentarian in 1982, I came away from some of the first contacts I had there with the knowledge that there's not an absolute single way to interpret Robert's Rules of Order. And so I try my hardest to provide what I believe is the best interpretation of parliamentary procedure in a given situation. I would also note that a parliamentarian gives no rulings. Only the person who is chairing the meeting can do that.
Okay. So you mentioned Robert's Rules of Order, and I know that we talk about Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. What is that, and why does the church use them?
Robert's Rules of Order is a book that was originally written by General Henry M. Robert because of his observations actually at a church conference where he didn't think there seemed to be a common understanding among the people present in how meetings should be conducted. And these people were from all over the United States, and they came in with different ideas and different methods and so forth. So that's what prompted him to write the book. In his initial work, he wrote, his initial work he wrote in 1867. And this provided a collection of actions known as parliamentary procedure to help groups and organizations to conduct business meetings efficiently and effectively. His book has been revised over the years by a variety of groups of editors. The current version is titled Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, and this is now in the 12th edition.
Wow. So why is parliamentary procedure important, and what are some of the reasons that we use it?
Yeah, parliamentary procedure is a set of rules that helps groups to make decisions and complete tasks in an orderly and democratic way. They are used to maintain order and good communication during meetings. These rules are based on the rights of the majority, the rights of the minority, especially a strong minority greater than 1/3, the rights of the individuals, the rights of absentees, and then of all of these together. That's really the purpose of parliamentary procedure, is to protect those rights and help the meeting flow in an effective and efficient way. Parliamentary procedure also helps to prevent errant leadership in various organizations from silencing the voice of the people. Perhaps the best way to explain what parliamentary procedure really is that it helps us to follow the counsel of Apostle Paul that we find in 1 Corinthians 14, where he wrote, "Let all things be done decently and in order."
Excellent. So let's see, how long has the church been using Robert's rules?
Well, I can't answer that question absolutely. I can say that we have been using them all my life, which is almost 73 years now. References to other works on parliamentary procedure can be found in the Herald as far back as 1873. A story in the March 15th, 1899 Herald reported that in April of 1876, the church actually adopted a book of rules written by J.W. Smith and Joseph Smith III. It appears, and I say appears because I've never been able to find an absolute yet. It's out there somewhere. I've just never been able to find it. But it appears that Robert's Rules of Order was adopted as our parliamentary authority in the mid-20th century.
That's pretty cool. And that's a long history of using resources and procedures that help us be mindful of the entire body.
Yeah. I should go on to say that Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, 12th edition, is currently identified in the church's bylaws. Actually, what the bylaws say is the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order. So this happens to be the 12th edition now, but that's actually in our bylaws. And so we are bound by that to observe it as our parliamentary authority. Now, many feel that the procedures outlined in the book help uphold our belief in striving to practice common consent, especially because of their aforementioned commitment to protecting the rights of all of those groups that I mentioned. Others think they don't go quite far enough towards that common consent goal. And so over the last several conferences, we have explored and experimented with other common consent practices in an effort to remain open to possible alternative methods for considering business.
That's awesome. Susan, welcome. It's so good to see you. I'm glad you made it.
Thank you. Sorry I was late, but got here as quickly as I could. And it's so good to see Larry and John. Thanks for joining Jen and I today. So I got caught in the last tail end part of this, John. But for our listeners, if they are delegates, how could they best prepare for their time at conference and be ready to participate in these legislative sessions?
Well, what I would recommend would be to go to the church website and then go to the 2025 World Conference pages. There is a section in there, a tab that says Documents, that includes the 14 legislative items that will be considered by the conference. You can read those, but to learn more about them, you can go beyond reading by signing up for the exploration sessions that are part of the pre-conference events. And you can be part of those conversations in which the items that will be considered will be discussed in some detail. Now, mission centers also often have activities, whether it's a Zoom meeting or a meeting somewhere, they often have activities where, and sometimes other ways too, just with communication, maybe written or whatever, but they do have ways to hear about delegate preparation. And so I would recommend that you seek those out in your mission centers as well. Usually you can contact the leader of your delegation, who usually happens to be the mission center president.
Yeah, excellent. And the more prepared people are, the better the legislative session goes.
Yes.
And so that's very helpful. So Larry, I understand you manage the legislative communications team. What does that mean beyond the parliamentary? What is that legislative communications team?
Well, the legislative communications team is actually a group of people who try to ensure that delegates are recognized and called upon in the order of parliamentary rules as motions and questions are raised about the business that comes before the conference. So the first presidency, which we're actually going to call the chair, because whoever's in charge of the meeting is the chair, need to know who and from which lectern the delegates are wishing to speak where they're located.
So I understand that there's a computer software that helps manage and facilitate that communication process. Can you tell us a little more about why do we even use this system, and how does that help facilitate the process?
So when did we start using the software? It was a number of years ago. I remember, and I'm jumping from the original notes here, as a teenager sitting up in the balcony near the organ and listening and watching the meetings go on, and they were very noisy because those, when the computer system was not used yet, the delegates would rise and they would holler out, "Mr. President" or "Mr. Chairman," and it made for a very noisy meeting. But it didn't highlight very well for those who did not speak English, but it mostly geared toward those who did speak English. So French and Spanish speakers, and even those from the 11 languages that our delegates used, were at a disadvantage. And like I say, I sat and became interested in parliamentary rule. This would have been in the late 60s, although I, like John, close to 82 to 85 when I joined the National Association of Parliamentarians, became interested in this. Now, the software was created, and there's been several that have gone through recycles of doing the best that it could, so that when a delegate places their name and what parliamentary action they wish to do into the system, the presidency would receive all of those names in the software, and that allows the chair to call upon other languages in an orderly fashion. It basically evens the playing field, so to speak.
Yeah, that is a challenging job, no matter whether somebody's, and I remember those days. I was much smaller than you were, Larry, but I do remember, "Mr. President," they jump on their chair sometimes. It was quite a spectacle. Yep. But even with the software, trying to make sure that it is done in a equitable manner is, it's a challenging job to be the chair, I would admit. So if I'm a delegate and I have prepared, I've read the legislation, I've gone to my mission center meetings, and now I'm at conference, what should I expect when it now comes to that legislative session? What's going to happen now?
Well, when you arrive and you check in at the registration booth, you'll receive the conference and delegate materials. And in these materials, you should find a delegate map. Now, there John has showing, I don't know if it was in 2023 or a previous map, but it's the full conference chamber.
Move that up towards your camera, John.
where each of the mission centers will sit, so that you're sitting with people of those of your delegation. And in doing so, then that's the first thing that you'll know where to go sit.
And so you talked earlier about the lecterns, and I think that's also noticed on the map. They're tiny little boxes, but that is notated on the map. So tell me a little more about those lecterns. That's a really fancy word.
Well, in the simplest term, a lectern is a temporary desk in the auditorium with a microphone throughout the conference chamber. There are 11 of them. And
Okay.
that's where the delegates can check in to decide to go speak when they're on the floor there. And just for information's sake, that will expand beyond at some point, 9 lecterns will be on the main floor. 1 lectern for those on the stage will be there for allowing them to be able to have access. And 1 will be in the balcony because we're trying to spread out enough that we don't get too close to each other and kind of keep down any kind of potential issues. So that's where the 11 are, but you could go virtually to any of those.
Right. Yeah. And I know everyone is anxious to know where their mission center is going to be seated, but we have not created the map yet. We still have a few steps to go through. So we appreciate everyone's patience. And as soon as we have that available, we will let people know that. So how are the number of delegates established, or how do we come up with how many delegates are in the legislative sessions?
The interesting part now is that we are expanding conference rules and doing things that there are some that are on remote sites and some that are in the auditorium. But the number of conference delegates is established by bylaws, the church's bylaws. And it says that each mission center shall be entitled to 2 delegates, additional delegates in the number adequate to bring the total number to approximately 2,800. We're not going to get 2,800 in the auditorium. The good part is that we've been able to spread out as far as our numbers, but it shall be proportioned among the mission centers according to their membership enrollment. So the maximum would be 2,800, but quite frankly, in the auditorium, we're lucky if we have 2,200, but it's still quite a few people for the 11 lectern areas that we have to be recognized. Remember, this is to be recognized as a delegate.
Absolutely, yes. And we may do another special session on remote sites later and talk a little bit about that, but we will have delegates in 2 physical sites, but with 3 remote connections, 1 for English, 1 for Spanish, 1 for French. So that's a follow-up
And
conversation.
I might say the software ties in the auditorium and the remote sites all in one, so the presidency can see who is seeking the floor, whether remotely or in the auditorium.
Yes, absolutely. That's just amazing to me. I mean, that just kind of blows my mind as to those connections and how we have intentionally tried to bring people together. And what John was saying about, how do we make the best effort at common consent? And so, yeah. So what else do our listeners need to know about this legislative process and the conference sessions? John or Larry?
I was
Either
going
one.
to have John. John's got some other stuff that he'd like to share, but I wanted to finish so that you have an idea here about when delegates are at the auditorium on the floor in their organization where their mission center is located. And if they're wishing to speak during the legislative sessions, they will approach one of my lectern operators at the temporary desk in the auditorium, and they will hand them a card. On this card, in which each delegate, like we've got here with Jen, will receive from their mission center section, and that allows them to put their delegate number. Every delegate has their specific number for them, and it's given to them at registration. The parliamentary action they wish to use is on the back side of the card. That will help you to write that information down on the front side. You give as a delegate to my lectern operators the card, who will make an entry on an iPad. This goes into the software, which allows the chair to see which delegate wants to do what action and where they are in the auditorium or remote sites. And they can call upon, being the chair can call upon them when the timing is right for them to speak. So that's how they're actually getting recognized, both in other languages, remotely, those in the auditorium, and so forth.
Yeah. And I would say that the chair is also often will pause to let the software collect that information. And so people, they want to get it in as soon as possible, but they do pause to try and see what is coming in and where. So, John.
For those who may not be terribly familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised 12th edition, I would like to suggest that you get a copy of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, in brief. Now, this is a concise. It's, as you can see here, it's only about a third of the size of the full book of Robert's Rules of Order. And so it's much easier for people to wade through this. It's also written in very concise, simple to understand language, unlike some parts of Robert's Rules of Order, the big one. And so this is available. Oh, I shouldn't advertise for anybody, but it's easy to get a hold of. You can get it on Amazon if you need to. Now, the other thing that I would like to say, if I'm going to ask for a moment of personal privilege, Madam Chairman,
Yes.
but Larry and I have known each other a very long time, and somehow I don't think we've ever talked about what Larry talked about how he got kind of hooked on the legislative process, parliamentary procedure, while he was at conference. That's what happened to me. I was just fascinated watching all of this. And so that's what sucked me in and got me to be a member of NAP eventually. So that's good information, Lori. Thank you for sharing that with us today.
That's very cool.
Well, I blame Leonard Young when he was working in the NAP as a parliamentarian.
Uh-oh.
With Len Young got me into down as an apostle and did parliamentary. So John was a president of one of the units in the state, encouraged me to take on leadership and to go further, and Len Young did. So it wasn't like we just suddenly picked up the book and decided this is so cool we need to read it.
Yep.
John, I understand that you are recording or doing some recording for some additional information, like informational videos for people who maybe haven't been to conference before that would be helpful as they prepare for the legislative process. It might actually even be a good refresher for people who maybe only encounter Robert's Rules at conference, like every couple of years. These, I think, would be a great resource. Do you think they're going to be available for everyone to use?
Yeah, it's actually one video,
okay.
And it is still in production, so it's not ready to go quite yet. But my understanding from the ones who are coordinating that is that eventually it will likely be available to others who might be interested, and they can find it on, again, as I understand it, on the Seekers webpage, and it's latterdayseekers.org. And at allthingsaspiritual.org, and they can just go into either of those sites when it finally gets posted out there. But yes, it will be available to others as well.
Okay, great. We can talk about maybe making a link to that available on the conference page, or maybe in an announcement also, just to help kind of ease people's access to that information. Let's see. We have a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to go back to the beginning. Some of them have to do with things other than parliamentary procedure. So I'm going to answer a couple of these. One was about the bundle that I referenced at the beginning, which is available only through early bird registration. Someone was asking about the tote bag. I left mine downstairs, so I don't have it with me here. The tote bag is actually made out of recycled billboard vinyl, and it's lined on the inside. It has really great canvas webbing straps. So it's a really sturdy bag. And I was able to put my conference materials, so like this thing, my iPad, a book, my wallet, and my water bottle all in the bag. So it's pretty sturdy, and I think it would be helpful to carry all of your things. So that's my promo for the tote bag. Let's see. Someone else commented that they can't even imagine how hard it would have been to hear, or just like what it would have been like to be in a conference with everyone yelling. Like, I can't even imagine that either. So I've heard people tell stories about it, but the concept of trying to get the chair's attention by yelling just seems like a foreign concept to me. So that would have been amazing.
Can I add something to that one, Jen?
Of course.
It was amazing to watch, and just, especially for a kid, it was just unbelievable. But there's something else about that, and Larry alluded to this, but because of the nature of that, whoever had the loudest voice usually got the attention and the recognition. And so that feeds back in my thinking, back into why Henry Robert wrote the book, because, whoever has the loudest voice, that's kind of not observing the rights of that person who's kind of faint in the distance,
Mm-hmm.
And so having this computer system helps to provide that kind of protection for all the people as well.
Yeah, I would have never been one that was the loudest, for sure. Let's see. We have a question about conference food and young adult activities. We are going to actually talk about food and age-specific activities in the know session. So I'm not going to try to go into that now, but we're going to invite some of those planners of those activities to come and be guests with us in one of our future sessions. So
stay tuned.
Pin that. Yeah. We've had a couple people ask for the title of that book again. John, could you share that one more time?
It's backwards when you show it.
Oh, weird.
It's a mirror image, John.
Weird.
Maybe we can put the name of that in the chat.
Yeah. It's Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, in brief.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there was a question, is it available in other languages? The question was in French.
I'm sorry, I don't know. Larry, do you know?
I'm going to respond, because while I was listening to you, I looked it up on, obviously, my computer and my phone. It is not in French, is what it tells me, because the politics and the things that go on in France versus the U.S. don't match up. And so they don't have it in French. I did look in Spanish, and it appears, I'm guessing, enough information that Spanish is an optional language. They could have that. I know that for the most part, trying to take the English version and get trained with those that are bilingual would be helpful, because we use Robert's Rules of Order in the United States, specifically because that's our host country for the church. And we have that as our parliamentary authority. So other languages, that's a good question. But I did find the French one, no, because of politics in France do not match up with what would be in the book.
Thank you, Larry.
It looks like there's another question, and we may not be able to review this today, but John, this feels like something that might be covered in the video that you guys are creating. Mm-hmm. The question is about whether some of the parliamentary language and actions are going to be discussed. So things like, what does it mean to move or second or amend something?
Yeah, we don't go into a lot of detail because it starts to get complicated, and that just expands the time. But we do name the 16 actions that will be available to delegates to use. I also would point out that when you get your materials, this is going to be backwards again, but when you get your materials in the book, there will be a chart that looks like this. that has all of the actions listed, and it, you know, it goes across the top. Requires a second, yes or no. It's debatable, yes or no. Amendable, yes or no. The vote required, yes or no. May be reconsidered, yes or no. So, you know, this is very handy for people to have, so that they understand what this particular action represents.
Do you know if the book that you referenced, the in brief version, does it kind of explain some of those terms also?
Yes, and
Okay.
and as I said before, it does so in language that's not that's a little easier to understand too.
It's like regular people language, not National Association of Parliamentarian language, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
So Marilyn, that might be a good place to start with, you know, some of those definitions, etc. And actually, one of the things on my to-do list is to send that chart over to John for review to make sure that it is still accurate. So that will be included in the materials this year as well. I think that covers all of the questions. I'm just double checking one last time. Yep, I think we're good.
Okay. Well, it is always a fascinating. Some people go, "Oh, it's so boring," but it is very fascinating when you really get into it, and how the church moves and acts together, and hopefully is, you know, allowing the voice of all to be heard. So I want to thank Larry and John for spending a little time with us today. And thank all of you who are online and are interested, and appreciate. I just saw Noel's comment, a picture book. Actually, Noel, that might not be a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to remind everybody you can find information about World Conference and the registration links at seaofchrist.org. at the 2025-World-Conference page. And remember that early registration goes through April 1. And so we have a little more than a month. And make sure to tell your friends and share with your family. And we look forward to seeing everyone at conference, hopefully. And if not, definitely online. And Jen and I will look forward to seeing you again for the next In the Know session, which will be 10 March, and watch for upcoming announcements. And we wish everyone a wonderful day. Thank you.